We're still live from Buda, live from Stormen Library. We have started the High North Dialogue 2021 by a session moderated by Arne Holm, and we'll end the High North Dialogue 2021 by a session moderated by Arne Holm. So Arne, maybe you're right, it's much more about we love the moderator than we love the host. However, this session is about Arctic politics, about Arctic diplomacy. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now ready for the ambassadors panel, 9 diplomats from the 8 Arctic states as well as the European Union. Arne, the floor is all yours. Greetings to Michael Mann in Brussels, and then hit it off.
Thank you so much, Andreas. Dear State Secretary, ambassadors, and dear audience, it's an honor for me to welcome you to this, I would call it a high-level ambassadors panels in the High North Dialogue. We have done this for some years. Some of you in the panel have been with us before. And it's a pleasure to invite you back, and to you new ambassadors, it's a pleasure to have you with us here in Bodø. In the rather complicated world, the need and hunger for dialogue is growing. And it may seem like an overambitious plan to invite 8 ambassadors and 1 state secretary on the stage together. But the fact that you all accepted the invitation shows both willingness and eager to have a dialogue going on among the Arctic countries and with the people living in the High North. That's a very good sign for the future generation following this conference. But of course, it also gives the panelists and me a challenge beyond common sense. But rather than focusing on the restrictions such a big panel may have, I, and I guess also the participants, have chosen to focus on the manifestation it is to show the world that East and West, allies and non-allies, still can meet each other, not only behind closed doors, but also out in the public. So the manifestation in itself is worth a try on this digital high-level meeting. I would start actually to introduce you all, so the audience knows that you are sitting together with them. First, State Secretary Audun Halvorsen, Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Michael Mann, Ambassador at Large for the Arctic, European Union. Mikael Antell, Finnish Ambassador to Norway. Teimuras Ramisvili, Russian Ambassador to Norway. Cecilia Björner, Swedish Ambassador to Norway. Jim DeHart, US Coordinator for the Arctic region. Patrick Parisot, Canadian Ambassador to Norway. Ingebjørg Davidsdottir, Icelandic Ambassador to Norway. And Jarl Friis Madsen, the Danish Ambassador to Norway. You are all very welcome. I start back in 2019 in Rovaniemi, where the last ministerial meeting in the Arctic Council was held. I was there myself. And that is an organization that includes all of you 8 Arctic ambassadors. That's the place in Rovaniemi back in 2019. That the first time, as far as I know, you didn't reach a joint declaration before you left Rovaniemi. The disagreement to find a fresh new roadmap for the Icelandic chairmanship was mainly one of the topics we are discussing today, the climate changes. There was a United States that did not accept the declaration as far as we, as journalists and participants outside the room, was told. And now we are just less than a month ahead of the new ministerial meeting, leaving the chairmanship from Iceland to Russia. So I will first, if you may allow me, Jim DeHart, turn to you, just to ask you a pretty simple question with maybe a complicated answer. Why did not USA agree on the joint declaration in Rovaniemi 2 years ago?
Well, thanks. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be here. And I participated in the High North Dialogue 5 years ago. So great to be back, at least virtually, and with colleagues, including State Secretary Halvorsen. Back in Rovaniemi, we had our previous administration had some differences on climate change language. I think this coming ministerial in Reykjavik will be very different. I think I'm absolutely confident that we're going to have solidarity at the ministerial meeting, including on climate. And I would mention a couple of really important events taking place today: the High North Dialogue and also Climate Summit in Washington, where President Biden is hosting some 40 world leaders. We see it as an important milestone to the COP26 meeting in Glasgow. So we are all in on climate, including this week virtually from Washington and at the upcoming ministerial meeting in Reykjavik.
So if I read you right, Mr. De Hart, you think that when the next ministerial meeting, you will have a joint declaration also on climate issues?
Well, I think, that's up to all of us together as members of the Arctic Council. When ministers meet together in Reykjavik, it's up to all of us what we do. But I think we're in a great position to have solidarity on the declaration at the ministerial, which will include great attention to climate, but also a lot of other important issues where we need to continue working in the Arctic.
Thank you so much. I turn to you, Icelandic Ambassador Ingebjörg Davidsdottir. I don't know if you can answer the question, but I'd like to ask you, how has it affected the Iceland chairmanship that there was no joint declaration 2 years ago, if at all? You have no sound.
Do I have sound now?
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. First of all, allow me to say that it's a great pleasure for being with you here today in this online event from Oslo. And I would also like to start by congratulating the organizers of this event for the creative thinking. It has, as far as I have followed the High North Dialogue for the past days, it seems to be a very successful event. So I'm really looking forward to hopefully being able to travel to Bodø next year for the next year's event. So well done, High North Dialogue. Coming back to your question, first of all, allow me to say that the Arctic is a key foreign policy for Iceland and has been so for years. We have enjoyed a broad political consensus on the Arctic issues across the political spectrum in Iceland. So that is a good thing. Regarding our chairmanship and whether ministers were not able to agree on a declaration during the last ministerial conference. As the US representative said, it's up to everyone to reach a consensus. That was unfortunately not possible last year, 2 years ago. But in a way, that does not, I wouldn't say that that has affected our chairmanship. What has, in a way, affected our chairmanship is the pandemic that is ongoing. But hopefully we will get rid of that situation soon. The COVID pandemic has put its mark on the chairmanship and the chairmanship projects. But like the organizers of the High North Dialogue, we have been creative and innovative. We have tried to find solutions in order to continue the chairmanship program and the day-to-day work of the council. As both the U.S. representative said and the leader of our conversation here today, we are having the ministerial conference in a few weeks' time in Reykjavik, and we very much look forward to that event. We are aiming for a physical meeting. and we have already confirmed participation from a few ministers. So that's a good thing. And we will look, of course, forward to passing the gavel to the incoming Russian chairmanship. I think I will stop now and.
Yeah, but just one follow-up, because I was going to ask you, as far as I know, the ministerial meeting is the 20th of May, if I remember right. And you said you have...
19th and 20th, yeah.
Yeah, and you say you have a confirmation from a few ministers. Do you think that you will be able to meet all 8 Arctic states in Reykjavik? Is that the plan, actually?
Physically?
Yeah.
That is the intention, yes.
Mm. And will there be any kind of marking with the people, or is this just going to be a closed meeting?
I didn't hear you quite clearly.
Yeah, normally you have a lot of things going on when you have this change in the chairmanship of the Arctic Council. Are you planning anything else than a ministerial meeting, or does the pandemic set a stop for all of that?
Well, we will of course have to think about that we still have the pandemic ongoing. So eventually we will have to. The organization of the meeting will have to be within. Taking that into account. So I would have to actually pass the torch to Reykjavik for that. To getting the answers that you're trying to search for.
Thank you so much. I turn to you, State Secretary Audun Halvorsen. As we are talking about now, we had 2 years of Arctic Council without a joint declaration. And it doesn't seem that has infected the work in the organization that much. Does that show a strength of the Arctic Council, or is that a weakness of the Arctic Council that you don't have to agree on anything?
Well, thank you, Arne, for that question. And let me at the outset also express my pleasure with being back at the High North Dialogue and with seeing so many diplomatic colleagues and friends, many of whom I haven't seen since last year and the pandemic's outset. And I'm very happy to see all of you and the ambassadors of the Arctic states and the EU. Just let me to start up on your first question, going back to Rovaniemi, Arne. I want to emphasize that since then we've had 2 very successful years during the Icelandic chairmanship, and we look forward to the change of the baton, so to say, and the Russian chairmanship from May. I think the Russian priorities, as they have signaled, are very interesting. A strong focus on the people of the Arctic, on sustainable growth, on climate and environmental issues, and cooperation in the Council as such. And these are concepts and policies that I really believe are at the core and should remain at the core of the Council as we celebrate our 25th year, which is, I think, an occasion worthy of celebration. Looking at sort of what has happened since Rovaniemi, I want to emphasize that even though there was no political level communique, and there was, as also Jim said, a disagreement on the language, there has been practical, effective, well-functioning work on the ground, so to say, in the working groups of the Council, including the working group on climate change, on the research areas. And this has happened with full participation from the US, that has made very important contributions, as they always do in the work of the Council, even though there was this political disagreement at the top level. So I think that really goes to show the strength of the Council, because even in a situation where you don't have a communique as such from the ministerial meeting, the work of the Council in all its aspects is able to continue. And I think that shows how varied this is, that our sort of thematic multi-level approach to issues of mutual interest in the Arctic really work. and the value of the work being done in the working groups, where I also want to underline that many of the observers to the Council, such as the EU, are really playing a constructive role, contributing to the work of the the working groups, that can then inform the political decisions of the Council. So we have moved beyond Rovaniemi. We are looking forward to Reykjavik, and I think the institution of the Council and the work it is doing is very much alive and well.
Thank you so far, Audun. And I move forward to you, Ramisvili. You are the one they are pointing at now on the 19th and 20th of May. You will take over the chairmanship in the Arctic Council. And what kind of expectation do you have for the next 2 years' leadership? And how joint can the organization be under the Russian leadership, you think?
Thank you, Arne. Well, welcome everyone in the panel. It's really a good achievement, and I have to thank the university and all those who organized such an indirect discussion on Arctic issues. Well, of course, I would be very much happy to hopefully next year to come in person to Bodø, which is really a very famous place, university in particular, for research and activities in the area of the field of Arctic research. I'm in an easy position as far as the priorities are concerned, because my colleague from Moscow, Mr. Korchinov, I think dwelled on it quite in detail. The overall agenda is very positive. It's, I think, pushes forward different activities within the Arctic Council and in between the Arctic states and national activities of each of the Arctic states. And it will just push it forward. And trying to adhere to that definitely it is related to the Russian priorities in developing Russian Arctic, which is also a very positive agenda. And I hope that the meetings, at least some of them, next period, at least next year, will be in person instead of being via video instruments, because it's a pity that we are sitting in Oslo and I didn't meet my Swedish colleagues, a new Swedish colleague, until just I saw her on the screen. So I welcome her as well. From my point of view, beyond what my colleague from Moscow has said, I have to say that we here, I'm, let's say, involved in Arctic policies quite for a long time, even in my previous capacity as ambassador to Denmark, and visiting real Arctic in Greenland. I have to say that what we have to think about, both in our deliberations in the Arctic Council and also beyond at a national and regional level, regional meaning in between the Arctic states, is that what I feel is a lack of kind of synergy in between different events, and only a very limited number of experts know well about what is going on. And some of the practices which might have been multiplied for the rest of the Arctic regions in our countries are not assessed well, deeply, and being, used for exploitation, for use. the conferences which are taking place Arctic Frontiers in Norway, famous conference, Russian similar conferences which are in St. Petersburg and in Arkhangelsk, like territory of dialogue, as cooperation in Arctic and so on. By the way, most of the conferences take place primarily in Norway and Russia. Well, that's why for member states of the Arctic Council, I think it's important, well, let's say, notion that I think probably other member states of the Arctic Council should also share with us in detail some of the practices and priorities of themselves, not only in the statements at the summits. I think that they might be also, I have an idea of probably the better synchronization of different events and issues which are discussed as the agenda items. Because there might be some similarity, but also some exceptional issues, some priority issues, which might be interesting for all member states and observers as well. By the way, the observers, the issue which very often becomes quite a touchy one, both politically and also practical issues. Well, one of the reasons the observers are very much active in Arctic is that there is a lack of cooperation between ourselves, between the primarily Arctic states. That is why it is also kind of signal to all of us, not only to you, but also to me as well, as a representative of Russia, that less we cooperate, less we find solutions, which definitely have consequences for the rest of the world, not only for the Arctic states, more other non-regional actors will be participating in activities and issues related to Arctic, especially in economic projects, in socially oriented economic issues, development of Arctic territories, so on.
Well, could I interrupt you, because you are mentioning the observer countries, and I don't know, do we have Michael Mann with us? I can't see him on the screen. Because I was going to ask him about exactly that question. There you are, Michael Mann. Welcome. Yeah. I couldn't see you. So if I could bring you in the discussion so far to, you haven't reached the observer status still. So 2 questions to you. Do you hope that will change? I know you will say that in practical reason, that doesn't matter whether you have been accepted or not. And second is the Arctic countries getting more important for the European Union than it used to be, and why?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. First of all, thanks very much for asking me to take part today. It's very nice to be at such a high-level event next to the 8 Arctic states. So we're very glad to be here. Yeah, I mean, on the question of our observer status, clearly we don't yet have formal observer status. But we're fortunate in an agreement that was reached in Kiruna back in 2013. We are basically treated de facto as being like observers. And so we are able to contribute very usefully, I think, to a number of working groups and task forces and expert groups. And I think our work there is very appreciated, and we're very grateful to be able to participate with our scientific knowledge and so forth. So yeah, I mean, it's not ideal that we're not observers, but it hasn't stopped us from making a positive contribution. Clearly, in the ideal world, we would very much like to have the formal observer status. But we will see how things develop. On the other point, I mean, definitely the Arctic is really rising up the political agenda because of partly general geopolitical developments in the world, but also, of course, with the changes in the Arctic being brought about by the effects of climate change. It's really accelerating the increase of interest. Obviously, we now have much greater transport connectivity possibilities, the possibility to exploit resources perhaps in the Arctic. So, it is hotting up, and you see countries that are definitely not Arctic countries now coming forward with Arctic policy documents. India, the most recent example. Now, the EU has had an Arctic policy document since 2008, in fact, so we've been updating our policy regularly. And we're now working on our latest sort of updated policy. We're hoping to publish our updated EU policy in October or at the latest in November. Clearly, I think the current priorities of our policy are still highly relevant. We're talking about climate action, of course, environmental protection, sustainable development, and international cooperation. And of course, the role that science and research plays in that, and of course, the very important role also of taking account of the knowledge and needs of the indigenous peoples. I think that will all remain, but so many things have happened in the last 5 years with climate change and with the effects of that and with the growing interest in the region that there are so many more new issues that we need to include as well. So we're now really starting the drafting work on updating our policy documents, and we're looking forward to being able to discuss it in excellent fora like this in the coming months. Thank you.
Thank you so much so far. So let's take a little step back and look at the Arctic as a whole, and you may raise your hand if you disagree, but one of the goals with the Arctic Cooperation and the work you're doing in Arctic is to keep Arctic an peaceful area with low military tension. It's important to do something with the climate change because Arctic is the area in the world that is among the most affected of the temperature raising, and it's also a goal to keep the demographic situation, to keep young people, to keep people, giving them a good life in the Arctic. And as far as I could see, nobody of you disagreed in these three goals. So then I have to point out that all the arrows are pointing the other way. I mean, the military tension is growing, the temperature is rising, and the young people are leaving the Arctic, leaving it as a place for older people, at least parts of the Arctic, at least this part of the Arctic, which is one of the most populated. I'm standing in the northern part of Norway. And why is that? And why aren't we able to do something really on these changes going the wrong way? So I would like first to go to Canada, actually, because you are a huge country. You have a lot of indigenous people living in the north, and the temperature, the changes in the climate are affecting not at least the indigenous people living in your part of the country. How would you say that the European Union and the other Arctic countries contribute to the goal to get the control over the climate change? And how does that affect you, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, thank you very much for your question, Moderator Holm. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers and the guests that are participating right now, and my colleague that I must admit, like others, I haven't seen for a while, despite that we're all living in Oslo. I would like also to say that despite this pandemic situation, I'm quite encouraged that we continue to find venues to discuss the important issues facing the Arctic region and the people who call it home. Would like to give a bit of a picture of the situation in Canada also. Canada's Arctic and Northern Policy Framework issued in fall 2019 is the cornerstone of how Canada's Arctic interests at home are driving our international Arctic priorities. Our North is home to over 130,000 Canadians spread over what represents 40% of Canada's land mass and 25% of the global Arctic. We are the second largest Arctic state. Half of Canada, northern population, is Indigenous, with some region reaching closer to 85%. We have a younger population in the north than in the rest of Canada, with over 60% of the population under the age of 40. This is one of the reasons why I'm thrilled that this year's conference is geared toward our young and emerging Arctic leaders. We need to work together with our youngest, best, and brightest if we are to tackle the challenges, while also taking full advantage of the great opportunity across the circumpolar region. To come to your direct question, I mean, the climate change is, of course, affecting our people in the north. It's not affecting only people in the north. It is affecting the whole planet right now. This is certainly, if you put aside the pandemic we're fighting right now, it's probably the greatest challenge we're all fighting. I think there's room for everyone in terms of, working on the climate change issue. I think today is a great day. These conference chaired by U.S. President Biden at this very moment, where my own Prime Minister will participate maybe at this time or later today. These are a very positive gesture in terms of addressing climate change, an issue that has been on our plate since 1992 minimally, but that just became of growing importance. We can see, and probably we'll see later during the day, that there would be even greater commitment to reduce the greenhouse gas emission. I think that we've moved gradually from the words, the speech, the intention. We have seen the difficulty to reach the targets, but I have the feeling that we have a turning point right now where the will of everyone is greater probably than it has ever been. In that sense, maybe the pandemic has shaken many of us. We just realized that these things, nobody can handle this situation alone. It's a work that has to be done by all of us. If there's a threat right now, this threat is for all of us. So I'm glad to see the cooperation that has been developed since the Arctic Council was born in my hometown of Ottawa 25 years ago. There's still a phenomenal cooperation going on through this body. And I remain absolutely optimistic about the fact that we'll be able to deal with the challenges of the day, acknowledging that no doubt we can do better than what we've done so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And if we then move to another huge Arctic country, not by itself, but if you include the island in the north, so if you move to Denmark, which is an Arctic state because of the huge island Greenland. And I turn to you, Ambassador Jarl Friis-Madsen. You have recently had an election in Greenland. Seems like more people in Greenland want to go for independence. You have the indigenous issues, you have the climate, and you also have a defense discussion going on the last at least couple of years on the change of Denmark's defense politics in Greenland. And of course, the picture everybody points out of the real catastrophe if the temperature still rises is that the ice on Greenland will melt and the sea level will raise. That is the picture we normally use. What's your thought about this, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, thank you very much, Arne. And these are the key issues, as you point out. When you look at a globe, it's very clear the importance that Greenland plays both in the climate area and in the security policy area. And it has done so ever since World War II. It is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. We have a joint foreign policy. We're going to have a joint Arctic policy that's going to come out in just a few weeks. And I think I will start with a statement that was made by my Prime Minister this morning in connection with President Biden's climate meeting that she is also participating in. She says to Bloomberg that climate outweighs the tensions with China and Russia, it outweighs the geopolitical tensions. What does she mean by that? She means that we do have, of course, issues that we don't agree on with different nations around the world, but we should all come together and agree on the climate goals that we have adopted. We also have seen that in speeches from leaders from all these nations just recently, just as late as yesterday. So basically, we feel that the old saying that what happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic. If the poles are melting, if the Greenland ice is melting, it's going to affect the entire world. But the opposite is also true, that what happens everywhere around the world is affecting the Arctic's climate. So it is extremely important that we all live up to the Paris Agreement. We try to take a very progressive stand in Denmark by having the most ambitious target that any world has, a 70% reduction of the CO2 emissions by 2030, and we're already well on our way to reach that. As regards to Greenland, Greenland is a huge area, 5 times as big as Norway, 100 times as big as Denmark in area, but just 56,000 people living there. They live from fisheries, extremely important, and that is also being affected by climate change. As for the elections, I think they are just basically confirming the path that we have seen so far. We have a great cooperation within the Kingdom of Denmark, with the Faroe Islands, with Greenland and Denmark on all issues, close dialogue. And I think that what you should also notice is that that during this election, actually not just climate, but also the environment was a part of the debate, because it became very much a question of mining, a huge mining project. And basically the coalition that won this, that was the coalition that was against this mining project that will now be stopped. So that was actually the key part of the themes of the elections, and environmental project in Greenland.
Thank you so much. I'd like to turn this discussion a little bit more into security issues. And I will go to you, Mikael Untitled, from the Finnish ambassador to Norway. What we have in common, you and me, is that we are having a border with our friend Ramisvili, the Russian border. How does the security policy and the military tension look from Finland these days?
Well, thank you very much, Arne. Good to be with you again, and good to be with colleagues, although digitally this time. I miss border, I have to say. I have been there so many times, and I will certainly be there live next year if possible. Regarding your question, Arne, it's of course obvious that we have seen a military build-up both in the Baltic Sea region and in the Arctic region. And from a Finnish perspective, I would say that we see a very close interlink between the Arctic and the Baltic Sea region. So we have had more tensions. Of course, as Jarl said, the geopolitics affect the Arctic, and the same with the climate policy. But I think it's extremely important now that we monitor the security situation, of course, closely all the time, but it is at the same time of paramount importance that we don't let this attention stray away from the climate policy and sustainable development and the local living conditions for the people in the area. And I must say, I sense a positive optimism now with the US back in a leading role in the international climate policy. It was already referred to today's virtual summit on climate issues. I also must say that it's very positive to see the agenda of the upcoming Russian Arctic Council chairmanship. In the autumn, Finland will take over the Barents Euro-Arctic chairmanship. And among our main priorities is also sustainable development and biodiversity also, which is very much affected by the bad climate situation we have. So I think we can find some synergies also between the Arctic Council and the Barents Euro-Arctic Council in the coming years. So just to round up, we need to follow the security situation closely. In the case of Finland, we have a very tight dialogue with our friends in the EU and in the NATO. We have established a very tight security cooperation with Sweden since many years. As you know, during the last years, we have also developed close defense cooperation with Norway, etc., etc. And all we do aims at increasing the stability in the region. But I think, just to close up, that it's of utmost importance that we stick to the international law and preserve the order that we have, and that we maintain the Arctic Council as a forum for progressive cooperation, especially on climate. But it cannot be a conservation park. At the same time, we need to, through all the green transition possibilities, to provide future prospects for all the people that live in our northern regions, and to find the balance between economic positive prospects and at the same time sustainable development. And I'm sure that this can be done now with the high technology that we have in the region, with new green energy forms, circular economy, green transport, electrification, hydrogen, ammonia, and etc. So, Arne, despite geopolitics, I'm, as you can see, quite optimistic and positive anyway regarding the future of our dear northern and Arctic regions.
Thank you so much, Mikael, for your optimistic view. And then we have another neighbor. We have Sweden, and if I'm right, Sweden is the country among us that has the latest update, or at least one of the latest update of their Arctic strategy. That you delivered a new document in October last year with a Swedish strategy. It was 10 years since the last time Sweden presented an Arctic strategy. And when I read your strategy, most of it could have been written 10 years ago, but there was one big change as far as I noted. And that was a chapter about security policy, where you, in a way, changed the way you organized your defense. You were turning from the south, you write in your strategy, not turning the back to the south, but you are turning your nose to the security situation in the north. That was a whole new chapter, actually, in your strategy. Why was that, Ambassador Cecilia Björner?
So let me be a little bit boring to ask first if you can see and hear me.
That we can see and hear you fine. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Arne. We haven't met, and I can't say, as all my colleagues here, that I'm glad to be back and I'm glad to see all of you again, because I'm the new kid on the block. I just arrived a couple of months ago. So I'm still in a process of joining Norway and my dear colleagues here. And my learning curve is, of course, extremely steep. And the opportunity to join you here is, of course, extremely useful. And I thank you so much for organizing this. I hear from my colleague that it's an important conference, and I am pleased to be able to join you. I also appreciate, Arne, that you put me at the end, and especially after my two colleagues from Denmark and Finland, because as almost always, I can put a blueprint on what they are saying. So I think I say this not to just escape, but to confirm that the very close cooperation and like-minded thinking in policy and strategy is still there. I sort of looked at my notes here, what to say, and I can tick off everything that was said by Jarl and Mikkel. So I will not repeat all that. First, one word on the climate and environment. I think I agree with everything that has been said. There is one more thing that is extremely important with the Arctic, and that is its uniqueness when it comes to biodiversity, for example. Its uniqueness, which is extremely important for the research. So there is going without saying, Arctic is as important as the rest of the world to save from climate change, but we have a responsibility to especially to the Arctic as well. And Sweden is working from a research point of view, but also taking responsibility for combating the climate change, of course. When you and I also want to say to my Russian colleague that we Sweden are very pleased with your priorities for the next presidency or chairmanship, that you're focusing so much on this, because we believe that your voice here is very important, and we're grateful for your taking a bit of a lead here. I also agree with my Russian colleague. I think it was very interesting the way he, I can copy exactly what Michael said about how we believe in the rule-based manner that we manage this region and the Arctic Council, how important it is. But I agree with my Russian colleague that perhaps it's time to scale up a little bit, be more active, have more energy into it, because of the importance, the growing importance, as you mentioned, Arne. I am not a security expert as my predecessor was, and I am a little bit hesitant to say very much about your question, Arne. I need more upgrading of my knowledge from further studies and uplearning. But I do not. I agree with you that there is a new attention, perhaps in the Swedish strategy for the Arctic on security. I don't think, from a political policy point of view, it's not to be seen as a response to a growing threat. We still believe that the balance and security situation in the Arctic is not characterized by a very higher tension, but rather to see it as a mobilizing of security in the whole of Sweden. We're not turning our back to the south. We, as Mikael said, it's the Baltic Sea and the Arctic in the very longer perspective is interacting areas for security attention. So it is possibly a way of you could say that it's to be judged rather that we are being more open when we discuss, and we want to discuss, and we want to find, as in all other aspects in the Arctic, also processes and ways and means to have a dialogue and discussion on security and defense and peace in this region. So it's a way to open up for further discussions and not to be seen as protection or contributing to any increased security. I also would...
Thank you, Cecilia. That is, thank you, and welcome to the family, actually, and welcome to the ambassador, the Sweden ambassador in Norway. I go back to you, Ramisvili, if you allow me, and when we are discussing security issues, sir. And I just want to ask you, because you are a free-spoken man, what kind of message do you want to send to the youth and to all us other, the others? Just a short while ago, on Friday, 26th of March, there was 3 Russian submarines within a radius of 300 meters, broke through the Arctic ice. And we could all see it all over the world on television, someplace between the North Pole, the Franz Josef Land, and Svalbard. That was an amazing sight, actually. I've never seen anything like it, not even on science fiction movies, Ramisvili. But my question to you, actually, is what kind of signal, what did you want to tell us, the rest of the world or the rest of the Arctic, by showing us these pictures?
Well, when I first saw it reminded me the Hollywood films of the Russian submarines. Well, that now we know that it can be done in practice. So, I don't think it's a signal. I don't know what is in the minds of militaries. I'm not representing the military, as you understand. I think that this proves that if there is no chance to avoid discussing heavy security issues in context of the Arctic, I think it was our predecessors, those who created the Arctic Council, those who have been, founding fathers of Arctic cooperation. To remember, they divided the whole set of issues into 2 big baskets. The major definitely was the one which is now under the auspices of the Arctic Council and regional, national conferences and dialogues related. And the second one related to the heavy security, where to the chief of staff to discuss the military issues related to Arctic. So, as you understand, we were lucky and wise to secure, to preserve the sustainable part or the creative part of the Arctic cooperation, the Arctic Council, but we didn't preserve the military branch, let's say, if I may say so, beyond, of course, the auspices of the Arctic Council, which was really very wise, where the military experts at a very high level, policymakers in military field, were discussing the issues of heavy security, which might be a concern for Russians, especially living in the Arctic polar area, the Norwegians living in the north of Norway, and any other countries living in the, I agree with the Finnish calling, this unique, undivided Baltic and Arctic zone. So that's why my suggestion is to think about it again. And if there is no other way, but especially in the more tense situation in the world, geopolitical, as you say, really give it to militaries to discuss. Not necessarily immediately at the level of chief of staffs, but at least at the expert level, leaving only creative issues to diplomacy, to researchers, to scientists, and business people, and first of all, the younger generation. And I think this is important message to the younger leader in the Arctic. I think they will be much wiser than us and in preventing aggravation in the heavy security, in discussing heavy security issues, and really creating a better world and better scope for the cooperation in the Arctic region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I would like to go to you, Odin, State Secretary from Norway, from the Foreign Ministry. And I try. I know I won't succeed, but I try to speak on behalf of the young people. I'm too old to speak for the young people, but anyhow, let's imagine I speak for the young people. When people growing up today see pictures like that, and I would, of course, include weapons from the other side, but this is a spectacular sight. Do you understand, Odin, that there is some fear for the situation out among people?
Say, Arne, that you look very youthful from where I sit. But to your very serious question, I would just want to emphasize that I still regard the Arctic as a region primarily characterized by stability and by cooperation. And we have talked at length about the Arctic Council, and I think that is a key mechanism for that, and has been and remains a key mechanism for that. Still, of course, the Arctic as such is in no way unaffected by, let's call them global tensions or changes in the security situation more generally. We see increased international interest, we see more activity from the Russian side and also from the Allied side. And of course, safeguarding, what should we say, the international structures that have allowed the Arctic framework, so to say, to work for so many years, is going to take a lot of work and a lot of attention. And I would argue that, for 25 years we have been able to focus almost exclusively on the sort of cooperative, mutually beneficial side of this issue. However, the region as such has also always had strategic importance, just in light of the geography, in light of the deployment of the Russian strategic forces, for example, this being the closest or the shortest flight path between North America and Russia. So these issues have always been there, but we have had the luxury of being able to ignore them more or less for some time. That has changed. And we need to be very vigilant that our increased and necessary attention to the strategic picture and the security dimension, which Ambassador Ramashvili mentioned, should I say, detracts from our constructive mutual cooperation in other areas to the greatest extent possible. So we should work together to shield those areas of cooperation where we can. I don't think people should be afraid. I think we should remain very conscious of the need to maintain those spaces of cooperation, to maintain the framework we have for governance, the respect for international law, which I think still prevails very strongly in the region among all the actors. So, but we need to follow developments closely, and there is no doubt that sort of the strategic attention, so to say, in the region has increased.
And if I go back to the United States and you, Jim DeHart, U.S. coordinator for the Arctic region, so Jim, what is the reason for the United States to to increase the military spending and the military expansion in Arctic? I mean, you invest more in Norwegian platforms, and you are more active on the sailing. You are building some icebreakers, and so on and so on. And what is the reason for that?
Well, Arne, thanks very much. Presence is very important. Arne, you mentioned, earlier that the sense of rising competition in the region, and that's a reality. And we do see the risks that are associated with more accessibility in the region. It does create risks. We will address these together with our allies in a very resolute way, and we're doing that every day. Very recently, as an example, we signed a new supplementary defense cooperation agreement with Norway. It's a great reflection of our very close alliance with Norway, and also, of course, with our other allies and partners in the region. But I think we can take some confidence here from the strong traditions of peace and cooperation in the Arctic, and I think that young people and local communities, indigenous communities, can take some confidence in the fact that the pattern of behavior has been cooperation for a long time. And as colleagues have mentioned, it's very much founded, it's grounded in the international law and the strong rules that govern behavior in the region and in institutions like the Arctic Council. And so when at the upcoming ministerial in Reykjavik, which, by the way, Secretary Blinken will attend, as he announced, I think, this will be all about highlighting and reinforcing the cooperation we've had for the last 25 years through the Council, and then setting out a really strong agenda for the next 25 years on supporting local communities, on addressing climate change, and putting out our vision, I think, of keeping the region safe and peaceful, and where cooperation prevails. We have no interest in introducing security or military issues to the discussions in the Arctic Council, by the way. And then, as has been mentioned, of course, Russia will take the chairmanship at the conclusion of this ministerial. It's very important. We've always had very good cooperation among the Arctic states in the Council, and we very much want that to continue. So we're prepared to engage toward cooperation with all members of the Council under the Russian chairmanship, and we see some areas where there's great potential to cooperate.
I'll move forward to Denmark and to you, Jarl. I mean, your colleagues almost said the Americans have just opened a new consulate on Greenland, and you have this discussion in Denmark or which kind of air forces you need to have on Greenland. I don't know if you have concluded on that. It seems like it's more a discussion, which again shows a more tension. How do you look at this, Jarl?
Well, certainly, Arne, you are always very well informed about everything that's going on in the Arctic. I know that from our private conversations. And first of all, we had a couple of years ago the discussion about airports in Greenland, and we considered this, of course, obviously a part of our critical infrastructure. And it ended, as you have been writing about, with 3 airports that will be built. And Denmark has partly financed these airports. And then secondly, as part of our long-term defense plan, we're spending 200 million euro, 1.5 billion Danish kroner, on strengthening our surveillance activities in Greenland and the Faroe Islands. Basically, I think you all know our historic Sirius Patrulle, which is a dog sledge that goes back and forth through Greenland, basically looking after our serenity and looking if something is happening on the ice. But we are now taking the step towards a more modern way of surveying what's going on. So that includes satellites and radars, but of course for purely defensive matters. We very much welcome the close cooperation with the United States in Greenland, the opening of the consulate in Nuuk. We've always had a close cooperation with the U.S. on Greenland, as you know, and it is with the location of Greenland very close to Canada and the U.S., this is only very natural. And let me just end by saying, on a slightly different note, that hopefully still a lot of young people are watching out there. It's always a pleasure to visit the university in Bodø, the North University. And the question about young people leaving the Arctic is a real one. But of course, this is not a challenge that's confined to the Arctic. This is taking place everywhere around the world where young people are leaving the smaller cities and going towards the bigger cities. Some of the answers to that you will actually find in the excellent white paper that the Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs or the Norwegian government has made on Norway, on the Arctic, because there was a youth panel. And gives a lot of the answers to what needs to happen in order to keep the young people up there. But certainly you need to make a livable condition. You need to have sustainable economic development. You need to have jobs. You need to have education, university, offering what all young people want. And we all know that it's extremely important that the population that we have in the Arctic, that we are able to keep that and be able to attract people coming there. We will actually, by these two defense issues and infrastructure issues, create new jobs in Greenland. We will have increased tourism in Greenland because of these three airports. So we believe that that can partly contribute to a positive development. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think you mentioned the Sirius patrol. In my history book, that is the only military brigade that is to stop the Norwegian invasion of another country. That was built to stop the Norwegian invasion of Greenland when they got the independence. And so it's time you change it, I think. I would like to use the opportunity now to thank you all for participating. I mean, we made it in peace, and it's a pleasure to bring you all together. I know that is not happening on a daily basis. So thank you, Audun Halvorsen, Michael Mann, Mikael Antell, Taimoras Ramisville, Cecilia Bjørner, Jim DeHart, Patrick Parisot, Ingebjørg Davidsdotter, Jarl Friis Madsen, and to the audience out there someplace in the air and here at Stormen in Bodø. Thank you and have a nice day, everybody.
Tusen takk, Arne, for digitally managing a discussion with 9 people. Impressive. It's time now for another break, our very last break here at the High-North Dialogue 2021. 30 minutes only. We'll be back at 3:30 p.m. To learn more about our 5th High-North hero. So get excited, get nervous, get a coffee, and be back at 3:30 Central European time sharp.